This then is the last ferial day of this liturgical year, for tomorrow is the feast of St. Andrew, Apostle, and therefore this is the last contact that we have with this crescendo of readings which goes towards eschatology. And in the first reading we have this very interesting revelation of the end times given as early as the time of the prophet Daniel. We notice how in this vision of things there is already this strange mystical dream, the figure coming through of a Son of Man. We also see the indication that there's going to be a judgment, but the court shall sit in judgment and his dominion shall be taken away. His being here a reference to another thing that we are familiar with, a beast. I have here something which reminds us of the origin of it all. There you can see one demon and one particular sin, pride, and that is the start of it all. Because this initial point in cosmic time when the brightest of all angels was so aware of his brightness and power that he stopped there at wanting to own it and therefore have an independence. And all that we see in subsequent time, therefore coming down to our scale on earth, is some kind of repercussion of that first movement of independence and owning. If one looks at the word pride, there's a big I in the middle of it, and when one thinks of the way in which even children very quickly get into some form of that sin, one sees repercussions even in miniature. The centre of the solar system, it's the individual, and very early on the child can command. But as we go through life, the same pattern re-emerges. Certain people have ways of commanding. Females have one way and males often have another. Females have subtle ways, men are more direct. But nevertheless, the power of a woman is well known. One very powerful way is the mood. A man will do anything to maintain peace. But it's a form of pride, a form of being God. We have control and know how to exercise it. Now, when it comes to what we would call the comeuppance, the reverse takes place. There was the case some years ago of this priest, Father Stephen Shire, who ended up in the beyond through a terrible accident, and he wasn't prepared. But he, in that dreadful experience, saw that he was before truth. And he, in the testimony that he gives, says that all that he could say in reaction to each revelation of things as they were, in his case, was yes, yes, yes. And he explains that when one is before truth, there is no getting away from it. Yes is the only answer. And therefore when he heard his sentence coming, yes was also his interior answer. At that point, as we know from his testimony, eventually this gentle voice came in and pleaded, give him one more chance. Mother, he is yours, do with him what you will. And he was sent back into his body, and now he's going around giving this testimony. But it has happened in several cases in this our generation, which is able to capture these things more powerfully than before because of the modern means that we have. YouTube, which therefore reaches people unexpectedly and will reach many people just like that, perhaps through divine providence. One that is well known is Gloria Polo. She was in Colombia and she was a dentist, and she was fulminated in a terrible storm, not prepared. and she was going to a horrible place, and she was en route shown all the issues, including the Ten Commandments, and she was instinctively saying, but I am a Catholic, there's a mistake. And it was given to her to understand that each of the commandments was gravely broken in ways that she had not fully realized, although secretly the conscience is always aware. She too was given a second chance, but on that same condition that she went around and proclaimed. And therefore we have these cases and many others who are doing in some way what Daniel was doing here, through this vision in the night, telling others what is to come. With regard to time, there is the fact that we do not know. My mother was telling me one time on the phone that this group of ministers and young people were in Bala College doing a weekend of theological study, and there was one young minister on the banister right up the top in a conversation with this laptop in his hand, which was very precious to him because of all the notes that were therein. The memory of that machine was his extended memory. And then the conversation got quite energetic at one point on that landing, and he was going to make a point, so he started to gesticulate to underline the point. And what happened? The laptop, the precious laptop, started to fall out of his control, but it wasn't quite yet out of his grasp, so he tried to get it back before it fell from the top of that landing. And in so doing, he too lost balance, so down he came, and within a few seconds, or maybe less than one, he was on the other side of time. It can be our case too. It can be our case very, very suddenly, and the lethal way of getting there is to be distracted in the car. Unfortunately, it's not only our distraction that we have to handle, but that of other people on the road as well. But it can happen to the best of people that they can, in the same day, not end up in the same bed that they got out of. Eternity is one distraction away. I remember one or two friends of mine had that experience at the wheel. In Italy, it's very courant. It's the most common cause of accidents on the motorways, that people actually, in the monotony of a long drive in the heat, just doze off. And on they go, with a pilot behind them, blocking the motorway for 3 hours. But there we are, at high speed. It's very high speed indeed. There's a stone in Brittany, France, where there is a memorial stone of some kind of epithet to this bishop who died on that spot in a situation like that. Monseigneur so-and-so, at this point, entered into life, entré dans la vie. And some naughty adolescent had added graffiti underneath it, à 100 à l'heure, at 100 kilometers an hour. So that's what it can be. No preparation. So that is what the Lord is warning us about in these last Gospels. Stay awake, for you do not know the day or the hour. And that means in practice that we value the value of each hour for what it is. It's something which, once we're in the beyond, we would wish to have just one tiny fraction of. And remember also that hours spent not in a state of grace are totally wasted. It's therefore important that we not only live in a state of grace, but also of intimacy, so that we have the best possible use, because in that way we can be meriting and saving other souls. Precisely perhaps might not get there if we're not fully awake. One last point, it's this. In this reading from Daniel, we see the great majesty which surrounds the throne. Myriads and myriads of beings in praise and adoration, seen again in the Apocalypse, often read at this time of year. And it is a reminder unto us that right now, as we approach the altar, there are quite a lot, and probably far more than we can actually imagine, of angels waiting for the words of consecration, seeing also what is happening when we become the tabernacles, and following us around, because the Lord is always accompanied. We do not know actually what we are doing at Holy Communion. It is a point at which heaven and earth meet, but at which also we are at risk. We can waste grace, and grace abused actually is not helpful, insofar as every time we do that, we damage our interior life. It's called hardening of the heart. So we must not get into that mode of treating lightly the Holy of Holies. We know that for a priest, that is one big element when it comes to his judgment, the way he has handled his guard. It applies to anyone who's drawing close to the maximum. God is God, and to appropriate God, to place him in our pocket, to use him as a toy, to make him, as it were, manipulated by our will and whim, is to re-fall again into that sin of pride in which the devil wanted to be in control. Who is like God? Replied Michael, which is his very name. That too is our answer. We do not exist, except by extension. We have received all that we have, and we have to give it back intact.